Have you ever heard of a detective so brilliant he solved every case except for the one that would haunt him forever? A case where the killer he was hunting turned out to be himself? This is the unbelievable true story of Inspector Robert Ledru, the detective who became his own prisoner. Our story begins in the summer of 1887, in the foggy port town of Le Havre, France. A string of brutal murders has the city in a state of terror. 6 sailors, dead, with no clues and no witnesses. The local police are baffled. Desperate, they call for the best man in Paris, Inspector Robert Ledru. At 35, Ledru was a living legend. His mind was a finely tuned instrument of logic, capable of seeing patterns where others saw only chaos. He didn't just solve crimes. He inhabited them, reconstructing them piece by piece with an almost supernatural intuition. But this genius came at a cost. Ledru was a man possessed by his work. He barely ate, slept even less, and was known to work for days on end, fueled by black coffee and an obsessive need to find the truth. It was as if his mind couldn't bear the silence, the stillness of an unsolved puzzle. Upon arriving in Le Havre, Ledru threw himself into the sailor murders. He spent his days at the docks interviewing witnesses, and his nights in the morgue, studying the victims. He was closing in, a theory taking shape in his restless mind. But just as he felt a breakthrough was near, a telegram arrived from his superiors in Paris. "Drop the case, return at once." A new, high-profile murder demanded his attention. Ledru was furious, but an order was an order. He left Le Havre, the mystery of the 6 sailors gnawing at him. The new case was on the sands of Saint-Adresse Beach, a picturesque spot just outside the city. A Parisian tourist named André Monet had been found that morning, shot dead. He had gone for a walk along the shore the previous night and never came back. Ledru arrived at the scene. The beach was eerily quiet, the tide having washed away most of the evidence. He knelt by the body. Monet's wallet was full, his gold watch still on his wrist. This wasn't a robbery. It was personal, or perhaps completely random. As Ledru surveyed the area, his legendary eye for detail caught something others had missed: faint impressions in the damp sand leading away from the body. Footprints. He followed the trail, his heart beginning to beat a little faster. These weren't prints from shoes or bare feet. They were softer, more delicate, as if the person had been walking only in socks. An odd detail, but it was the next discovery that would stop Ledru cold. He leaned closer to one of the prints, tracing its outline in the sand. His breath caught in his throat. The footprint was missing the impression of the big toe. A wave of ice-cold dread washed over him. Ledru knew that footprint. He had known it his entire life. Ever since a childhood accident, his own right foot was missing its big toe. For a long, silent moment, the world's greatest detective stood motionless on that beach, the sound of the waves crashing against the shore like a death knell. The evidence was undeniable. The footprints in the sand were his own. Without a word to anyone, he turned and walked back to his hotel. He locked the door, and for the rest of the day, no one saw or heard from him. The man who lived to solve puzzles was now faced with the most horrifying puzzle of all. He was the prime suspect in his own investigation. That night he found sand in his socks. He checked his service revolver. A bullet was missing. He remembered fragmented dreams, flashes of a moonlit beach, the sharp crack of a gunshot. The next morning, a pale and shaken Inspector Ledru appeared at the police headquarters in Paris. His superiors were shocked by his appearance. He looked like a man who had stared into the abyss. He placed a plaster cast of the footprint on the table. "I have solved the murder of André Monet," he said, his voice barely a whisper. Then he did the unthinkable. He took off his right shoe and sock, revealing his foot. The missing toe. The room fell into a stunned silence. "I believe," Ledru said, his voice trembling, "that I am the man you are looking for. I believe I killed André Monet in my sleep." At first they thought it was a joke, a macabre jest from an overworked mind. But Ledru was deadly serious. He insisted he was a somnambulist, a sleepwalker. He recounted the evidence, the footprint, the sand in his socks, the missing bullet, the nightmarish dreams. Still, they couldn't believe it. The idea that their star detective could be a killer, an unconscious one at that, was too fantastic. To prove his terrifying theory, Ledru demanded an experiment. That night, he was locked in a hotel room, with 2 guards posted outside the door. His revolver, loaded with 2 blank cartridges, was placed on his bedside table. For hours, nothing happened. Then, around midnight, the guards heard the doorknob turn. The door creaked open, and Inspector Ledru stepped into the hallway. His eyes were open, but they were vacant, lifeless. He moved like a puppet, his actions stiff and automatic. He raised the revolver, not at the guards, but towards an empty space down the corridor, as if seeing something only he could see. He fired twice. The blanks exploded with a flash, filling the hall with smoke. Then, just as suddenly, Ledru collapsed to the floor, unconscious. When he awoke the next morning, he had no memory of the event. He only knew what the terrified guards told him. The trial was one of the strangest in French history. Medical experts testified about the mysterious condition of somnambulism, explaining that a person could perform complex actions, walking, talking, even firing a weapon, all while being completely asleep, with no conscious awareness or control. The court was faced with an unprecedented dilemma. How do you sentence a man who is a model citizen by day, but a potential killer by night? The verdict was as unique as the case itself. Inspector Robert Ledru was declared sane, but subject to his affliction. And so, a sentence was crafted just for him. By day, he was a free man, allowed to walk the streets of Paris. But every night, as the sun began to set, he was required to report to the local prison and lock himself into a cell. The great detective became his own jailer. For the rest of his life, Ledru lived this double existence. Parisians would often see the famous detective walking along the Seine, a solitary figure with weary eyes, leaning on his cane. But as dusk approached, he would turn and walk purposefully toward the prison, a punctual and obedient prisoner of his own mind. He never worked on another case. When asked about his greatest investigation, he would offer a faint, sad smile and say, "The one that solved itself." Robert Ledru died peacefully in his sleep in 1939, at the age of 77. But a whisper of a legend followed him to his grave. Some say that in his final dream, he returned to that beach at Le Havre, forever following a trail of footprints in the sand, a trail that led him back, again and again, to himself. It's a chilling reminder that sometimes the greatest mysteries aren't out there in the world, but hidden deep within our own minds. Thank you for watching this incredible story. If you found it as fascinating as I did, please hit that like button and subscribe for more tales from the stranger side of history. See you next time.